Thank you all so much for being here today. We're super excited about this. This is one of my favorite parts of training, when our faculty and our previous SI leaders get to join us. So without any further ado, thank you all again. I want to just briefly say a couple of words about each person here today and then turn it over to you all to give introductions. And then Oscar, who was one of our previous panelists, because he's now our graduate assistant, was also a previous SI leader, is going to ask the panelists some questions. All right, so we have Noah Bryant here from, actually calling in from the UK. I don't even know what time it is there. Is one of our Fulbright scholars and graduated. Has it been 2 semesters now? Oh my gosh, Noah.
Yeah, I'll have my master's degree by the end of the fall.
We're so proud of Noah and everything you've accomplished, Noah. And I see you have your SI shirt on, totally representing.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I packed it when I first moved here and I forgot it was in my drawer until last night. So I went and dug it out.
I love it. That's fantastic. And then we have Dr. Harrison here as well. Thanks so much for being here, one of our psychology instructors.
No worries. I'm glad to be here.
And also, I have to look at the exact title of the award that you received from us last semester. You are our outstanding new SI faculty. So proud of that.
Oh, thank you. And in case you guys don't know, Emily just won a very prestigious award from the university for all her work here too. So congratulations are in order for Emily as well.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And then we have Dr. Erin Barding with us as well. One of our biology faculty, long-standing SI supporters. And Dr. Barding won our, what did we call that one? Faculty SI champion, but you're also one of our outstanding, just veteran overall SI supporters as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. All right, well, we can start with introductions and just kind of go around, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at the university and, you know, your experience and tenure with SI so far. So we'll start with you, Dr. Barding.
Oh, yeah. So I've been at UNG, North Georgia, since 2010. And so I don't even know when SI started at UNG. I was, I think, one of the first classes to have an SI or a couple SIs, and that was for Biology 1108. And so I teach that most semesters, and so typically have an SI or two during that. And yeah, I've just been a big fan of the program since it started, and I love getting to meet SIs and recommending SIs, and I'm a big fan, and I encourage students to participate in SI sessions. I've just found it very, very helpful, particularly when there's high attendance in my classes. I can definitely see the results of students who attend SI sessions regularly and how well they do. And I particularly like building relationships with the SI facilitators. Back in the olden days, it used to always be students who had me for class, and then they were SIs. Now I think it's just, there's lots of mixing and matching, and it's very difficult to match up. But yeah, so I just love the SI program, and I really like to get to know the facilitators and meet with them consistently so that we're both on the same page, because then it works better when students attend and know that I support it. And know that I know what they're doing in the SI sessions and that it's going to benefit them greatly. So.
Thank you. Very, very true. That relationship is so important between the faculty and the facilitator. All right, Dr. Harrison.
All right. So I've been at UNG since fall 2017. So this will be my 6th year here. Oh, that sounds like a long time now that I say that out loud. I am in the psychology department, as Emily stated. I teach quantitative methods, which is the big statistics class for the psychology major, which tends to be a big hurdle for a lot of students. And I've had an SI for the first time this past semester, and it has been wonderful. I worked very closely with Sydney, my SI, and I think it really, really benefited some of my students. I also was able to enlist Sydney's help in my lab. So a big component of that class is to learn, not just learn statistics and how to do them by hand calculations, but how to use a computer software program to do them. And a lot of students come to that class with not very many computer skills. So Sydney has been, or my SI Sydney has been tremendously helpful in helping students get those computer skills that they need, especially if I'm, going around the lab trying to solve problems. I've got another pair of eyes that can help solve some of those problems while I'm teaching. So I think that this is a tremendously wonderful program, and it has been super helpful.
Thank you. And yes, one of your course was one of the courses that we did kind of incorporate the lab into last semester, where Sydney joined in, and that's an option for facilitators for various subjects as well. Thank you. All right, Noah.
All right. Well, let's see, I came to UNG for my undergrad because I studied history for my bachelor's degree. And I started in fall 17, I think, is when I started. Now I'm trying to think back. I did not facilitate for the first semester, obviously. I think it was the following semester. Cheyenne Chester was an SI on the Cumming campus where I was an SI, and we got to know each other through student government on campus. And I didn't have an SI in my class, but Cheyenne was like, hey, is at that point I was thinking about going into the education program. And she said, hey, if you want some kind of experience in a sort of classroom setting, you should look into SI. And so she really pressured me to get going. I came to a couple of her sessions, even though she wasn't my facilitator, and it wasn't a class I was actually taking. And then eventually I came in, I facilitated for World History 2 on the Cumming campus for multiple semesters, went into being a full-time mentor. Then my last semester, I actually went back and facilitate, or I think it was my last or second to last semester, I facilitated again for World History 2 on the Cumming campus, and kind of split my time between the Gainesville campus and Cumming campus, and mentoring and facilitating at the same time. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Noah. Such great expertise on this panel today. So Oscar, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask a few questions that SI leaders have submitted. And yeah, we'll just let you take over. Sarah, you can unpin me.
Perfect. Once again, like Emily said, thank y'all so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. But just wanted to start off with asking, what do you think is like the benefit of really having that strong faculty facilitator relationship? So benefit both on your end, maybe the students' end, anything like that.
I can jump in and just say that I think that it adds street cred. Basically, if the students know that the faculty and their teacher supports this program and knows that it can benefit students. So I like to have a close relationship with my SI facilitator. And they can also tell me things that students sometimes are not willing to speak with me about or ask about. I know sometimes students think that we're, monsters, and they won't come to office hours necessarily, or they're afraid to ask questions in class. And so I like to have that relationship with my SI, because they will pass on that information sometimes that the students are willing to share with them, like, she's going too fast, or I don't understand this chapter, or I don't understand the material she's providing to me. And so I think they can be a really good kind of liaison between the students and the class and me, and help me understand the students' perspective. And obviously the students get a lot of information, great information from the SIs, because they've successfully completed the course. And so they have street cred because obviously they're an SI because they've done well in that course. So it works both ways, I think.
I think Aaron said the main thing that I was gonna say, definitely. I mean, professors can be as nice as they want to and try to be as friendly as they want to, but there are some things that students just will not ask the professor, even if the professor is begging them to. But students do not feel intimidated by asking those questions to the SI, and that's very, very helpful. Again, just like Aaron said, so I'm just repeating the same thing that you said. The SI kind of acts as a barometer that you can see, oh, well, maybe I didn't do a good job of covering that material. Maybe I need to go over that kind of stuff again. And you can kind of see where the problems are in your class by talking with the SI. Yeah, so I think that that's very, very helpful, definitely.
Yeah, and then I mean, just to kind of like hop on to all of that, you know, from a student's perspective and a facilitator perspective, it's like I had a good relationship as a facilitator with my member of faculty, but it's a lot easier to kind of communicate with the students because we're, you know, peers and we're on the same level. And I always try to kind of redirect when students would come to me with a lot of stuff that, you know, I couldn't necessarily help them with. I would always try to redirect to those office hours that faculty always have, because students were afraid to go to that, because especially if they're coming in, you know, right out of high school and this is their first semester, which was typical with our course. Having a one-on-one, you know, meeting with a teacher in high school is a completely different experience than in, you know, college. And they're still kind of coming at it from that perspective of this is a bad thing when I have to meet one-on-one with this person versus, you know, this is a normal thing because, you know, without talking to the professor or to a facilitator to try to, you know, pass it on to the professor, students don't like, it's hard, there's a disconnect, and members of faculty don't know that students aren't really understanding it other than when, you know, they get graded assignments back that are terrible. And at that point, it's kind of like too late to go back and fix it for what you just tested on. So it's really, it's a really good dynamic to kind of work with students and faculty. And I think it's really important that as facilitators, we engage with our members of faculty a lot. You know, I always dropped in to office hour meetings with my member of faculty. I was on campus, so I just dropped in, said, hey, you know, chatted. It was always great.
Yeah, and I think also from like a student perspective, like I was on the team for several semesters, but I worked with a lot of different faculty, but even like those faculty members, like they would see me in the hallway and they'd be like, Oscar, like, hello. So like just building those relationships within the department was like one of my favorite parts, I think. But I think Noah, kind of your points leads me to my next question. So what does communication or collaboration look like for each of you? Like, what do you prefer when it comes to communicating with your SI facilitator that's in your class? Like, how often? What do you typically discuss? Those kinds of things.
I guess I can start again. I'll just say I've had, especially if I have never, if I have an SI assigned to me that I've never had as an SI, or especially didn't have in my class or in my section, we usually end up setting up kind of weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings to check in. And then again, if they're brand new to the SI program, then I can share, and I always do this anyway, kind of cover some of the concepts that are most confusing to students, things that I know, hurdles that I know that they're going to have, and that definitely I think should be incorporated into some of the SI sessions, whether that be study skills or certain ways to study or actual concepts. And so sometimes I'll meet with SIs every single week, but if I've had them for a couple semesters, right, we don't need to meet maybe as frequently, but I still like to check in to see if there's problems or things that students are telling them that, again, they haven't communicated with me, so that I can address that in class. But I do still think that the whole like anonymous aspect of SI, like that which I've heard conflicting things on, but like we're not supposed to know necessarily who's going to SI. You can tell usually who's going to SI. But, you know, just again, that communication with the facilitator to know if there's any issues that I need to address actually in class.
So typically what I did is, one, I gave my cell phone number to my SI so that we could communicate whenever things came up. So like if my SI had a really good session or a really bad session, she could text me and say, yo, you know, decent number of people came here. They were asking questions about this, and I go, okay, good. I need to make sure that I address that in next class. We also typically met kind of after class for a variety of reasons. Maybe the SI felt like, maybe I need to beef up on this skill because they're asking a lot of questions about it. Or, you gave this practice problem out, but, there's no answer, like, okay, how should I teach them how to do this sort of thing? So, we try to stay in communication fairly regularly. Like I said, especially at the end of the class, we typically have like a 5-minute meeting sort of thing just to see what was going on. For tests, I could communicate, this material is definitely going to be on the test, but I could tell my SI that, but I wouldn't tell my students necessarily that. So she could make sure she covers material that was going to be on the test without exactly telling them that it was going to be on the test. If that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. I'll be quiet.
And then again, like from the kind of student facilitator perspective, it was, it's a lot of the same. I was only ever with one member of faculty, so it's, I'm coming at this from that experience. But it was often, I was like on campus a lot because I was doing other stuff, and I knew when her office hours were, and they were basically every day at the same time. And so if I had questions or whatever, I would try to stop, and I would always try to do it at least once a week, even if I didn't have like an SI related, question or concern or something, and stop in for 10 or 15 minutes. I know, like as a mentor talking with other facilitators, there's been times in the past where they're like the faculty that they're assigned to wants to set like very specific meetings with goals in mind. And so their kind of thing was at the end of the week, they would kind of send an email to set up a meeting for the next week. And they would just do that for, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes a week. And just kind of like, it was very specific to that class and kind of what's going on in that class and what students seem to be struggling with and stuff like that. But it kind of depends on your member of faculty and like what their kind of goals are for students to get out of SI. So yeah, it just depends kind of on who you're assigned to and the way that they want to communicate and the way that you want to communicate. So yeah.
Awesome. So next up, I'm curious, what would you say makes like a successful facilitator, or is there something that like a facilitator does and you're just like, yes, I love that? Anything like that?
I would say one of the most helpful things is to model appropriate behavior in class. Obviously the SI usually doesn't need to be taking notes, right? They've already taken the class, but to be engaged, and I welcome them to ask questions or to chime in if they have a helpful way to remember something or to approach a particular concept. I also love it when at least once a week in class that the SI, and I always ask them like to get up and announce what they're covering in their sessions, especially before a quiz or a test or an exam, where again, I do kind of the same thing where I'll like tell them like, this is definitely gonna be on the test and maybe this is the way I'm gonna approach asking that on a test. And so they'll be like, hey, I talked to Dr. Barding and she said that this is definitely gonna be around maybe on the test. And so I'm gonna be covering that concept or working out these problems in SI, and that's a really good way to review for the exam. So I think modeling really good behavior in class and being engaged, paying attention, asking questions, making comments, and then again, like making sure that they update the students on times and when they're meeting and what they're covering in sessions.
So first of all, ditto to everything that Aaron said. I think that's really good advice. But another thing, one thing that really impressed me with Sydney was I was going on to a conference sometime last semester, and I was like, "Yep, I got to cancel the class, because I'm going to be in a conference." And Sydney was like, "I can do a study session during this period of time," and I was like, "You can? This is wonderful." So, this is not something that I asked Sydney for. This is something that she just like volunteered, maybe it'd be good to do that. And I was like, yeah, that sounds perfect. I wasn't even thinking about that. And by the way, Emily, if there's a SI award sort of thing, I want to mention Sydney for that sort of thing. So there's a shameless plug there, but yeah, I'll
Yeah, and so I think, you know, again, coming at it from a facilitator and and even a mentor who's observed a lot of facilitators, you know, someone who's dedicated and innovative is always nice. So seeing, you know, I'm assuming everyone's still getting the activity manual that Cheyenne and I made. So you'll get that if you haven't already. But like taking that and then not just stopping there, being like, okay, well, I see you have these hundreds of list of activities that we can do, but I think I've got a better one, and then doing something different, and really just being dedicated, even like when students are, you know, still struggling with new material and stuff, not kind of like giving up and really supporting them, because that's what our role is to support them and to kind of help them learn this information the best that we can. So yeah.
So I think this next question is kind of similar, but SI, we focus a lot on leadership and we work hard to develop our team as leaders. So what leadership skills have you seen like your SI facilitators like embody, or are there any like certain qualities or characteristics like leadership wise that you look for in a facilitator?
I think even if you have to fake it in the beginning, confidence is really important, right? Because again, it's the same thing with instructors, right? If we're confident, even if we're faking it, then the students feel more comfortable with, okay, she's got a game plan. She kind of knows what's going on. She's going to help us succeed. And if the facilitators are confident, and also relatable, right? And so being a leader means you need good communication skills, and you need confidence to you know, get your point across and stuff, but also be relatable so that the students feel comfortable, again, coming to sessions, but also sharing with them if they're really struggling. And so the most effective kind of leadership qualities I've seen in a lot of our facilitators, which are awesome, is really great communication skills, confidence, and then also the ability to send out an SOS. If they're flailing, if they're struggling with either the material because it's maybe something new that I didn't cover previously, or, you know, they're having really low attendance in their sessions, or again, they're struggling for whatever reason, to communicate with the students, to communicate with me so that we can get it fixed and help them out.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with those skills. I think one great thing my SI was able to do is like very early on in the semester, she was able to make friends with a lot of these individuals and talk about things that were not just school related, but you know, what movies have you seen recently, that sort of thing. So you kind of develop this friendship before you go to work and learn some of the things. Another thing that I think is great about this program, it's not necessarily that you select for individuals to be leaders, but they kind of develop that as they go through the program. I mean, one thing that students I don't think realize is that sometimes, you know, public speaking, even for professors, is a little bit nerve-wracking. And so SI for the very first time, you know, you're in front of people, you're talking about something that's somewhat difficult. And it's kind of a good opportunity to get those jitters out for the real world when you go out in the real world and you're having to give some of these things. So, I mean, yes, we try to select for individuals that are good leaders, but I also think that this program's a good job of, you know, teaching some of those skills as well.
Yes, I mean, same for everything. You know, seeing, like I said, kind of as a mentor and seeing other facilitators and stuff kind of enlightens you. And I mean, it's you'll be kind of surprised, like when you do your peer observations. I assume that's still being done. I'm just like, I haven't seen any of the stuff from this semester, so, but like you'll be able to see other people, like your other facilitators, and see what they do, and it can really enlighten you of like some of your areas that like leadership opportunity or areas that you can grow in. Um, and like that was always really helpful for me. And then especially like coming in being a mentor for a while and not facilitating, I got to see even more people. And then going back to facilitating, I just, you know, came in with all these ideas and stuff. I think a big thing is just being able to, like, as the student and as a facilitator, come in like to a session or even in the class and still be a peer and on the level of all the students, and, you know, kind of leading from within, and not like you're not up here and they're down here, you're on the same level, and just really building them up is a really good like leadership skill to have.
Awesome. I know we have a lot more questions, but I wanted to make sure we had some time for anybody in the audience. If you have any questions specifically that you would like to ask the panel, feel free to raise your hand and ask, or type it in the chat.
While people are typing, I'll explain the background because I saw somebody comment on it. This is the building I'm currently in somewhere. Oh, wait, hold on. I think I'm over here somewhere in the building. I'm on the opposite side, so it's weird because the building's flipped around. This is the main arts building. So this is my university building.
I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll end with this question for everybody. What is like one piece of advice that you would give to new SI facilitators?
Oh, hold on. I saw a question.
Oh,
Where do SIs meet with their students weekly? Always in class, like during lecture, and then during sessions. It's typically 2 sessions a week. Sometimes it's different depending on the class load and organization, but typically the averages. So, if you have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, you meet with them Monday, Wednesday, Friday in class, and then, whenever you hold your 2 sessions a week. And then in the hall, whenever you see them, just be like, hey, where were you? Why were you in session last week? And then no, just kidding, don't do that. Well, I mean, sort of, but don't don't target them. But, you can have a little bit of fun with them.
I don't really have a good answer for one piece of advice. I was gonna say just consistent communication, both with the students. I really like when SIs, do the surveys even mid-semester if they have low attendance, to send out a survey to better accommodate more students in the class. So changing some times up, or changing when the study sessions are, maybe before an exam, or something like that. So just being flexible, and then keeping consistent communication both with the students via, I always have like a SI module in D2L, and that way they can post session times or updates or activities even that they post for the students to work on before they come or after they come if they weren't able to attend sessions. And then also to keep good communication with me, because obviously we need to work together as a team to trade and swap information. And I will say one more thing, and then I'll be quiet, is one of the things that I found really, really helpful for SIs to do, and this started during COVID, and now I encourage SIs to do this too, is to share with students like a typical study schedule that you have, right? Because it's all about time management and dealing with all of your courses and your different ways and using different parts of your brain and writing papers and going to labs and all this stuff. And so one of my SIs, Meredith, who was amazing, and I had her for multiple sessions during COVID, she just showed students during a session one day, like what her typical study session is, like pencil it in. I'm going to study for this hour for this class. I'm going to give myself a break during this time. I'm going to eat lunch. And that was really helpful, just to juggle all the things you're expected to do as a student, both academic and non-academic.
That's a great idea, and I'm going to steal that from you, Aaron. So I hope that that's all right. One thing that I'd say, so yeah, be in constant communication. Let the professor know what they could be doing better as well. In a nice way. The biggest problem, I think, is sometimes the advertising and the getting people to show up. And so I think that's something that you want to work on as an SI. Advertise the heck out of it. Talk about it as often as you can. And try to individually talk with some students to try to recruit them. Okay, what are you doing right now, or what are you doing at this point in time, to make sure that those sessions are filled up, because I think that they're very, very helpful. It's just a matter of trying to advertise them and persuade students to go to them and see how helpful they are.
Just as from the question in the chat, like I think from a student, if I had a member of faculty that I didn't have as a student, but then I was assigned to them, I think the biggest thing would be when you have that initial meeting with them at the beginning of the semester, just communicating with them, because it might not be something that they think to bring up. And so you should probably bring it up as how they like to communicate. Do they like to communicate over email? Do they like to communicate in person? You know, how do they like to, so that you can kind of, because the way your member of faculty likes to communicate will be the easiest way for them to communicate what they expect of you as the facilitator and what they expect of the students in class. So if they have if they like to talk in person, but you keep sending them emails, you're not going to really hear back with those emails. Or if you do, it's going to be, you send a 10-paragraph email and you get K sent back, that's not what they like. Not that I've ever had that happen, but I have heard similar things before. Or I've heard the other response of, that a student's having a hard time, so they send their professor an email, and it's, this long drawn out email, and they just say, come to my office hour, and that's the response they get. And the student is like, I don't want to come to your office hour, but it's so much information. That's what the professor prefers. So just really communicating with them of, what do they prefer? Do they want to meet, before class, 5 minutes before class, before you sit in, and just say like, hey, or do they want a specific time, or do they like email more than than talking in person? I've never met anyone who enjoys that more, but it could just be a generational thing. So I don't know.
Awesome. So that is all the time that we have today. Thank you so much again, Dr. Barding, Dr. Harrison, and Noah, for coming and just sharing this valuable information. We appreciate you taking time out of your, I'm sure, very busy schedules the week before class is starting. Noah, you're literally on another continent. So yes, thank you so much for taking the time today to come and speak with us.
Thank
No
you.
problem. My pleasure. This was a nice distraction from me pulling articles out of the library all day today. So it was nice.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Same thing. Thank you guys, and good luck with next semester.
All right. So we just finished up our last panel. I think our next guests have joined the room. Oh, yes, there's Tracy. Hi. And Samantha is with us today as well. So next we get to hear from two of our essential offices at the University of North Georgia, counseling services and student accessibility services. So we're so pleased to have you both here with us today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here and talk to the group today. All right, so I'll just actually, if you want to start with introductions, kind of who you are and what you do in the office that you work in at UNG, and we can start with Samantha. Do you go by Samantha or Sam?
Sam's fine.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
that's fine. I'm Sam Ledbetter. I'm a licensed social worker in the student counseling office. I'm just one of the clinicians on the Dahlonega campus. Just one of the regular Joes, don't have a boss job or anything, but so I see clients, and then this year we're doing the step care model. So it'll be a lot more psychoeducation and getting people involved. So that's what our office is doing this year.
Tracy, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Tracy Hurd. I'm the Assistant Director for Student Accessibility Services on the Dahlonega campus. And our office works with students who have disabilities to provide them accommodations so that they have equal access while they're in the classroom or in housing here on the Dahlonega campus.
Awesome. So to start, we'll just kind of get you both to, and we can go in the order that you just introduced yourself, if that works. Talk to us about your general services, what you offer, what resources are available to your students out of your office, and not only for their personal benefit, but as peer leaders, how they can help kind of educate and refer those that they'll be working with this semester.
Yeah, so like briefly mentioned, the step care model is what we're moving to this year. And so that's really putting a lot of the self-determination in your hands. It's showing you guys that you are capable human beings. You just need the right information on how to do whatever you're trying to accomplish, you know, like be less anxious or more focused or whatever. So we spent a lot of the summer, there's a team of us here on the campus that have been working on our cross campuses on a self-help library. So a lot of resources so that if you don't feel like therapy is, you know, the level that you need to be at, that's what the step care system is about. Not everyone needs individual therapy to work through a problem. You know, maybe it's just reading a really enlightening book about the topic matter or doing some psychoeducation online. And if you don't get that, that's fine. That's what we are here for, right? It's kind of moving through. It's assuming that you don't need the worst case scenario. You know, you're capable of doing a lot with a little. So we're going to be emphasizing that. So we've come up with a self-help library. I don't know that it's published yet, but we're going to be, you know, doing that shortly. And so once you guys would have access to that. So you're welcome to use it yourself, of course, or to refer some of the people you're working with to that. There's an anxiety section, there's a academic success section, there's a depression section. So there's a lot of different sections that if you're like, that's a little bit above me, you can always refer them to that, or you can let, you know, Emily or however your chain of command works know so that they can be, the school can be alerted that, hey, this person might need additional support. And we're part of the team that gets alerted. So we're available to do that, whatever we need to do. So we're moving more from like 90% individual therapy from the past to more balance of workshops. So virtual workshops, we'll still have some in-person workshops, a lot more wellness initiative activities that's going through that rec center. There's like a Mary Lee Smith, I don't remember exactly what her title is, but she's doing a lot there too. That's not necessarily us, but it is mental health related. And of course, we'll be doing a lot more group therapy. So instead of like us spending an hour or 50 minutes with one person, we can really use our resources to help a lot more people, because we're going to have you guys in a room together. You guys are going to share what's different, what's the same, and we can provide like advice and help you guys to help each other too. So that's kind of like what we're moving towards this semester. I think, was that everything you wanted to know, Emily?
Yeah, I think that's a really good overview. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so student accessibility services, as I said, we do provide accommodations to students. We do have an office on each of the campuses. There is not an office in Blue Ridge, but we do meet with students in Blue Ridge. So if a student were to disclose to you that they have a disability, that they need assistance, you should definitely refer them to our office. Students do have to come to us. It's a little different than in high school. We don't go out and search for students. They do have to self-disclose and come to us and register with us. And they do have to provide documentation of that disability that meets the Board of Regents guidelines for documentation. But if they don't have that documentation that they need that meets the guidelines, we can certainly help them and refer them out for testing to get the documentation that they need. But if a student had accommodations in high school, that's usually through an IEP or a 504, we recommend that they do go ahead and register with our office, and then we can get those accommodations in place for them, either provisionally or on a permanent basis. And we provide testing accommodations. Those are really common ones, but we also provide accommodations in the classroom to help with note-taking assistance. Really, it just depends on the student. Just because a student has one particular diagnosis or a disability, there's not just a set of accommodations that they're handed. Every student is different, just as we are all different. Their limitations are all different. So every student and their list of accommodations are going to be based on that particular student and their limitations, because that's what accommodations are designed to do, is to give them access based on their limitations. So we meet with students, we go through what's called an interactive process. We look at their documentation, and we talk with the student to determine which accommodations are going to give them access in the classroom and on campus. and then their accommodations are tailored specifically to them. But again, if you have a student disclose, number one, you should never ask a student if they have a disability, because for confidentiality reasons, you just don't want to do that. But if a student discloses to you that they do have a learning disability or any other type of disability, you can certainly refer them to our office, and we are happy to work with them and make sure that they have the accommodations that they need for access. So, was there anything I didn't cover, Emily?
That was great. Thank you. We'll get to some of the, individual, I guess, offices where those locations are across campuses as well. So that, because we actually here today, we have students from, or student leaders from, I think 3 or 4 of our campuses, because this is our new incoming leader team. So, all right. So I kind of have a little bit of a more tailored question for each of you. So I'll just start first with Sam. Coming from a student leader perspective, so the audience, how would you kind of suggest that they work with their peers who are also, students experiencing the college life and various individual life scenarios at the same time? Being that it's a very complex world, we're kind of like post-online learning. So many incoming freshmen, for example, might have learned online in their last year of high school. We've also seen social anxieties and things like that increased. So what would be some of the signs to recognize and steps to take as a peer working with other students, and how they might refer to your office?
Of course. So first things first, we're all human. And so that's a big strength that we all have. So just being there to listen a little bit, like you're not a therapist, I don't expect you to be, but I'm sure you've had friends that have vented a little bit or, expressed something. Like, I don't want your first thought to be like, look, they're anxious, let's refer them to student counseling, or let's tell the whole school, let's sound the alarms. Like, that's not necessary in most cases. In most cases, it's just they want you to acknowledge, validate, be like, yeah, that does suck. Is there anything I can personally do to help you? Like if they're like, yeah, I really think like maybe some more frequent sessions, and I don't know what the flexibility is, but you can make that happen, or that's when you can be like, well, maybe we need to get tutoring services involved. So you can have both supports, or, whatever the case may be. Like that's when we can look at campus supports to get them more academic support, like academic success coaching and things of that nature. Like it's not all going to be on you, but I found that the best way to help someone is to ask them. Like why are you choosing to tell this to me in your head? Like, why are they choosing to tell this to me? Maybe I need to ask, like, what can I do to help you? Don't make them feel weird for having anxiety. Like, I'm sure everyone on this call has had social anxiety at some point. Yeah, it's probably amplified now because of COVID. If I'm in a room with more than 5 people, I'm like, and it's my job to like be a people person here. So it's not unusual in any way. And it's just, that's a big part. Like if everyone was more understanding and validating of people, I wouldn't have as many people come in here just for that reason, not feeling heard. I don't want you to make them feel like it's a big deal if they say they're anxious. And of course you can direct them to some self-help resources. But the first step is just letting them talk for like a little bit. What's going on? Because sometimes if you just throw in a solution, they're not going to feel heard. You don't even know the full situation. They could be trying to say someone in their family is sick, but all you heard was, I'm sad. And you're like, here's some depression material. Are they depressed or are they grieving? Like those are 2 different things, if you don't know the answer, just be a human and send them to someone who does. I know you guys are leaders, but you're also not professionals for this. So I don't expect you to do more than just be a human and get them to the person that is the professional in this. I think that was the whole question. I'm really bad with double part questions.
No, I think that's good. We might have some of the leaders ask more specific questions at the end too. So yeah, if there's anything that needs to be expanded on, we can do that. All right, so Tracy, similar question, but kind of like, what are the general accessibility laws and best practices, especially coming from a peer leader perspective, kind of signs and steps to take, as you mentioned before, you don't want to ask anyone if they have a disability. So how do you approach students especially within a group learning setting that we offer? Because you're going to see different students with different varying abilities. So how do they work with those students, a variety of students, and any confidentiality concerns when students might disclose?
Well, first of all, like I said, don't ask, wait for the student to tell you. If a student does tell you, that is confidential information. So don't run and tell your friend, hey, guess what I just found out? Guess who has whatever? That is confidential information. But make sure that you do, like Sam said, that you are aware of all of the resources on campus. UNG has a lot of resources that are available for our students, not just counseling, not just SAS, but there are lots of resources out there that we refer students to all the time, not just working within our office. But you being well versed in those resources can be tremendously helpful to the students that you work with. And so again, if a student discloses to you, number one, make sure that you let them know, I'm not going to tell anybody. That's great. But have you reached out to SAS? You might want to consider stopping by their office, talking to them. Can make sure that you let them know that it is confidential, doesn't show up anywhere on their records. Them being registered with us never shows up on their transcript. So everything within our office is kept confidential as well. But then also ask them, have you considered working with an academic coach or going to tutoring? Of course, if they're working with you, they're already working with SI. So that's a big plus right there. But again, just if you see someone and you know that maybe perhaps they have a differing learning style, just be patient and work with them the best that you can if they don't disclose to you that they do have a disability. But again, knowing those resources to point them in the right direction is really going to be helpful for them. Academic coaching works very well with students who have executive functioning issues, as well as other issues with organization, study skills, those types of things. So that's a really big one to keep in mind when you're working with students with differing learning styles. So just being aware of those things and knowing the right place to send them is very, very important. Is that okay?
Yes.
I'm like Sam, I kind of forget parts of the question when I start thinking about the first part of the answer. So
yeah, that one's kind of that's a big question. And one of the good things I will say too about the organized study that these leaders are going to be presenting with their students is that they actually do look at different learning preferences and bring in types of cognitive learning strategies that will work with a variety of learners. So a lot of that will help to kind of meet the needs of diverse student groups that you all will be working with as leaders as well. So I would love to hear from both of you kind of what are some of the misconceptions and barriers that you see, especially just working with college age students. But of course, we've got, adult learners, we've got a variety of learners that we all work with. What are some of the barriers just generally and misconceptions about seeking services and maybe how you respond to those or would like to break those down?
So of course, I'm sure that everyone's aware mental health has been stigmatized historically for a very long time, and especially in certain cultures. But usually we hear, I shouldn't need help. I should be able to do it on my own. This is ridiculous, like whatever. Like, yeah, it sucks to have these symptoms, but judging them doesn't make them better. It actually makes them worse. And so like when they come in and I don't think I actually need this. They told me that since I'm feeling this way, I should come here. The first step is just being like, listen, we're not here to diagnose you. It's not even about that. Like, I know SAS, you need a diagnosis, right? We're the opposite. Like, we don't need a diagnosis. we're here to help you with whatever the symptoms are, and if we can, get to the root and work on that as well. You know, we're not going to fix things for you. That's not possible. You've got to do the work yourself. And I think when we focus on that, of like, it's not a disease. You know, you might have a disorder, but that's not the focus here. We're not attacking it like a disease. We're attacking it like, let's take care of your body, because your mind is an organ just like any other. You know, let's take care of your mind in terms of like, it's okay to have fun too. Let's have some hobbies that enrich your life. Let's have relationships. And so I'm a lot of us do like a behavioral approach of like, hey, you're sleeping 20 hours a day. What do you think that's doing for your brain and your body? You know, let's work on, like, we give them really easy steps that they can take. By easy, I mean like it's one thing, not easy as in easy to do, but just give them like one thing, and then the more they work on that one thing, something else will be a little bit easier. So the biggest conceptions is a little bit different by culture, but in general, it's just this: I shouldn't be broken. I disagree. I don't think anyone's broken. I think we're all just very quirky people. But other people kind of look at it that way, like, because everyone looks at you when you're like having a panic attack, they're like, "Yee." Like, that's not helping the stigma. So that we get that a lot. People or staff members or faculty are forcing someone to come in. We don't do mandated therapy. And there's a reason for that. Like that can make a very bad relationship. That person in their mind is gonna have a worse relationship with mental health if they think that they have to do it. It's like a punishment. So those are kind of, I don't want to get into too many specifics, but in general, it's just this idea of like, I'm less than because I need support. Like, no, everyone needs support. Thank you.
I think for us, there are a lot of stereotypes around certain disabilities. And it's like I said before, everybody's different. So even if you know somebody has a specific disability, you can't pigeonhole them into a certain stereotype. Everybody's different. Everybody and their limitations are different. And everyone can excel regardless of their disability. So even if I don't particularly like the term learning disability, I think it's more of a learning difference than a disability. Everybody learns differently, and just because you learn differently doesn't mean you aren't extremely intelligent and still can excel and just be your very best and do a wonderful job in the classroom. So just keep that in mind. Just because somebody has a specific diagnosis doesn't make them a less intelligent person than someone else, and doesn't mean that they can't learn just as much and just as well as everybody else can.
So I know you both kind of touched on this a little bit, especially in your introductions, but what is the referral process like? So as a peer leader, if I did feel like a student was maybe even at risk, so that's maybe a more extreme situation, more of an emergency situation, but even lesser emergency levels of referral, how could they get that peer into your office or send them to you to kind of explore their options?
Yeah, so I know for us, like I say, there's no mandated therapy. There is an exception if there's a safety risk. If one of your peers is saying like, I want to kill myself, we're gonna get you some help. You can walk them directly to our office. We have walk-in hours between 8 and 11 and 1 to 4. But of course, if it's out of those hours, we still would rather see them sooner versus later. After hours, there is an on-call therapist that's accessible through the resident directors, so that's the dorm staff bosses, and then campus police. So if it's after hours, then you would want to use that resource, and then I would get in touch with our on-call therapist and come and do a safety assessment. So if it's safety related, I don't care if all of us have someone in our office doing a session. Miss Cindy will either sit with them for 10 minutes until one of us is out, or they will pull one of us out, because safety is the priority. And all of our clients understand that. We tell them when they come in, if I get pulled out, it's not because you don't matter, it's because somebody else needs me more in that moment than you will. And so like that's the kind of crisis protocol. Walk them over, call campus, if it's a threat to yourself, then you call campus police first. But if you're able to just walk them over, if they're not willing to come, that's when you can call campus police and be like, because you're not going to pick them up and move them to our office, right? You don't touch them. Hopefully you have a good enough rapport with relationship with them that they will go willingly. But if they don't, then that's when you call campus police. If it's like right now you're worried, if it's a little bit less like it's urgent, but it's not like you think they're gonna like attack someone right then and there, then you can do a see something, say something report. I'm sure you guys have heard of that before, and that goes to the right people to go and make contact with that student. But if you know they're suicidal, try not to leave them alone. Just call and have someone come as a professional to deal with it if they won't walk with you over here. If it's not an emergency, they can call or walk in anytime to make an appointment, or they can walk in during walk-in hours. Those aren't just for crises, that's for anything. And of course, like if you did let Emily know, for example, that you're worried about someone, Emily can, put that in the system of like, hey, maybe you want to check on this student. Or like once they're with us, it's confidential, but how they get here, that's between the school. Like the school decides how they get into our building, or they decide as an individual. But after they come in, that's when it becomes confidential.
For us, you can certainly suggest that the student come to our offices. You can even tell them how to register for our services. It's really easy. You go to ung.edu, type in SAS in the search bar. One of the search returns is register with SAS, but we cannot force a student to accept accommodations. Even though we may see that they need the accommodations, that they would be more successful with the accommodations, they have to do that on their own. So we can't force them to do that. We've had lots of students who register with our office, who submit documentations to our office, and then we get down to the point of having their accommodations already, and they never make that final step to even pick up their accommodation letters and give them to their professors. So we cannot make a student accept the accommodations. So we try, but we can't. So
Thank you both so much. I'm actually going to drop, I'm going to be really honest. I don't know the best way to get to the see something, say something form, because it's in various places. But if you go to the Dean of Students site, they actually have several forms. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop that in. But SI leaders will make sure you have all of this information after this conversation today as well. Is there I do want to get to any final questions that the group might have, because I want to be respectful of our time and our presenters' time. Caleb says, if a student were to disclose that they might have some learning differences, as you put it, what kinds of resources does SAS offer for those students?
well, again, we would request documentation from that student, and we would help them to get testing if they had not previously had testing done. Then we would look at their functional limitations, because again, every student is different. And then based on those limitations, we would tailor accommodations for them. There are lots of accommodations out there that are available, assistance with note-taking in a variety of ways. We could do alternative media, we could do screen readers, we can actually do speech to text. And then of course the text to speech, which is the screen reader. We can do extended time on testing. There are just a whole myriad of accommodations that are available, but again, those are tailored for each individual student. So I know that's kind of a vague answer, but it's hard to tell you without knowing what that student needs, exactly what we would do. And again, for learning differences, those all vary considerably. If it's a math learning disorder that they have, then there are other accommodations that are different for math than they would be for reading. A screen reader is not going to do a whole lot of good for a math disorder, but being able to use a calculator and a formula sheet and take pictures of the board rather than assistance with note taking, those are things that help. So it really just depends on the individual student and what their limitations are. So I hope that answered your question.
All right, do we have any final questions? I don't see any in the chat. I don't know that I think I forgot to ask or mention, can you just tell us which building on each campus, if you have that information memorized exactly where the other offices are? I know you both work mostly in Dahlonega, kind of where they can walk students or take themselves if they're seeking your services as well.
Yes, in Dahlonega, we're in the Stewart Success Center, room 246. On Gainesville Center, or Gainesville campus, excuse me, the Student Center, room 115. Oconee would be the administrative building, room 110. And then Cumming, it's room 238, 300 Aquatic Circle. And then we have one main number, 706-867-4402. And then you just listen for the extensions. Dahlonega would be 1, and then Gainesville, et cetera, et cetera.
On the Dahlonega campus, we are located also in the Stewart Success Center, excuse me, and we are room 233. And then the Cumming, they are upstairs in that Student Resource Center. I'm sorry, I don't remember the room number. I was in Cumming for a whole year. You would think I would remember that, but I I have forgotten that at this point. And in the on the Gainesville campus, they are in the building to the left of the Student Center, and I can't remember the name of that building either. I apologize. And then in Oconee, it's just that one building there where they're located. Of course, in Blue Ridge, like I said, we don't have a specific office there, but if a student does an intake with their office, we actually go to the Blue Ridge campus and meet with them there. So.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. I can't thank you enough for being here today and talking to our leaders. The work that you do on a daily basis is so important for the entire UNG community. So thank you for everything you do every day. And we'll certainly be referring to you throughout the semester and make sure that our SI leaders have all your resources as well after today. So thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your week.
You too.